All right, everyone, let's do this. How are you? How are your peoples? Welcome to this week's episode of our podcast. It's called Is Breakfast Included? If you're new here, thanks for checking in. Go back and check out some of our older episodes. If you're a returning listener, thanks for sticking around. On this week's episode, I sit down with my good buddy Cosmo Wilson. Cosmo's an LD extraordinaire. That's a lighting director. He works for some of the biggest bands at the highest level, and he's been doing it for a long time. If you listen to Cosmo speak, you see how much he loves this industry, how much he loves the people around him, and how much he loves positivity. And that's really what this interview was about, man. It couldn't be about anything better but positivity in this industry. It was a lot of fun. Let's check it out.
I did a few podcasts over the pandemic, and I enjoy them. And
Cool,
I said,
cool.
I'm honored, and I appreciate you asking me to do yours.
All right, man. Well, let's get it started, man. Tell everyone who you are.
My name is Cosmo Wilson. I am a lighting designer, lighting director. I'm also known as the ambiance coordinator on tours because I love to tour. But for the most part, I've worked for classic rock bands for a very, very long time, and I continue to do so. And I will continue to do so as long as they continue to live.
Right on, man. I'll start off by saying this. For years, I heard your name. I heard Cosmo Wilson or Cosmo, my buddy Cosmo. and when I came on to Aerosmith, I was finally just delighted to meet you and realized why everyone loved you so much.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it's I've been in the business now this is my 44th year in the business. So I've met a lot of people over that time, and I think it's very important to be nice and to connect with people, and you got to get along on the road. So I've got a lot of people that I love on the road.
Yeah, I think that is the key element in what we do, man. Is just to be nice.
Simple.
It's too well, first of all, life's too short just to be a jerk. But like you said, we have to get along out there. We're not going home with the fans. We're jumping on a bus with each other, and we got to coexist.
So we went back and forth depending on where work was for him. And I went to high school at one point in New York. I went to the High School of Art and Design. And one of my best friends, who's now deceased, is a guy named Dennis Urey. And I had moved back to New York in December of 78. And I was looking for a job, actually. And he said that a band he was working with needed a drum tech. And I had no experience as any kind of tech. I mean, I played in high school bands. I played guitar. I beat around the drums as you do, And so I said, sure. So I went, and this band was called Falcon Eddie. There was a television show called Rich Man, Poor Man, and there was a character named Falcon Eddie, like Italian. But they made it Falcon Eddie, two names. And so I went out and I did a drum check. First day didn't go so well. They didn't want to hire me, but I said, give me a chance. Let me learn the drum kit. So I went to the loft where they were rehearsing, and I learned the kit. And the next gig, I aced it, and I was hired. And it was funny after, I worked with so many bands as a backline guy. Back then I worked as a guitar tech, keyboard tech, bass tech, drum tech, you name it. And I worked for a lot of different bands, and that's how I got my start.
So that you got your start in the back line, which is really, I always say we're the last ones everyone thinks about.
Yeah.
How did you get into what you're doing now? Like, what was your first lighting gig?
Well, I was in New York for a while working for bands, and I moved back to Florida, and I started working. I worked as a stagehand pretty much, and I worked a lot of different odd jobs with like a company that built sets, show sets, and I wanted to work down at the Lakeland Civic Center, which in the early '80s was the place where all the bands played. So I couldn't go. I couldn't, even though I was working for the union, I didn't have my union card, and since it was a different local in Lakeland, they wouldn't let me work at the local until I got my card in my local. So literally like a few days after I got my card, which is in April of 1983, I got a call to go down and work the Lakeland Civic Center show. And so I went down, and I think it was Kiss. I'm pretty sure it was Kiss. First concert I ever saw was Kiss in '76 at the Lakeland Civic Center. So here we are 7 years later, and I'm a stagehand working for Kiss at the Lakeland Civic Center. But that's how I got my start into concerts. And the way I got into lighting is, I mean, I've told this story a lot, but I I as you know, on a load in, when the first trucks that come in, that they unload the boxes, then you push them from the back of the truck to the stage, from the loading dock to the stage. And I hated pushing boxes. And I noticed the guys that first went to work with the lighting crew. So they would, we would push boxes and trusses and dimmers in and cable boxes. And at some point they would start forklifting the trusses up to the stage. And that I realized they would need crew to help put stuff together. It gives, after a couple of shows and load-ins, I'd hear them say, we need a couple of guys on stage. I need 4 guys on stage to bolt together truss or to run cable or to put up the dimmer. So I would gravitate to the back of the stage. And the minute the crew chief said that, I would be on the stage. And so I just started working for lighting because they were the first ones to start working. I mean, I worked for the audio department and sets and backline guys and stuff. But lighting, I just kind of gravitated to. And then I ran TrustBot the first time, and I loved it. And I just started giving my phone number out to guys that were coming in to get a job on the road. So, but that's how I got into lighting.
What exactly is a TrustBot? For those people who don't know what it is.
Okay. Well, spotlights. Everybody knows what a follow spot is. They're usually out, in the house of the audience, and they light the band from the front. But it's very cool to have a truss spot on the stage. And what they are is they're usually on the upstage truss, and they're in the air, and they're a lot closer to the band member. But they look really cool because they kind of highlight and halo their hair, and plus you can see the beam cutting through the other light. So it's it's very rock. So the operators, for all the spotlights in an arena, the operators are generally local crew. If I gravitated, I graduated from running truss spots to running front of house spots. So, but a truss spot, is the actual spotlight follow spot that travels with the band, and they rig it on top of the truss to follow the band around the stage.
So that's how you got into lighting. When was it? What year did you actually start touring?
Well, I worked for the Lakeland Civic Center for at the time it seemed like an interminably long time. I started, my first gig was in '79, and then I started working at the Lakeland Civic Center in '83, and in 1986, what had happened is several bands had come through the Lakeland Civic Center, and it was the same lighting company with the same crew chief, a guy named Gordy Barden. And he finally gave me the number to the lighting company, which is called TTR, and they were in Dallas. And they were actually in the Showco shop with Very Light. And the guy's name was Richard Hartman. And so I got his number, and I started calling him every week. And he said, that they have tours going out. They were doing Genesis, and this is 1986. He says they were going to do Genesis, and they might need me, and so I was relentless. I called him every week. But what finally happened is the Cure was touring the U.S., and they had 2 British lighting crew guys, but they didn't have work visas for them. So what happened is they'd gone into Canada, and they couldn't get back in the country. So all of a sudden they got deported back to Britain, and they needed 2 guys immediately. So I was one of the guys he called, and he called me. He says, "Can you be in Chicago tomorrow?" And they got me a plane ticket and flew me to Chicago, and I busted ass. And the next thing I got after that led me to Genesis, and that was that's how I got into it. That was my first road gig. It was Cure in 1986.
That's pretty cool, man.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was thrilled. I'll never forget being on a bus the first time. I was like, I couldn't sleep because I was so excited.
Yeah, that was right there at the peak of their powers too. The Cure.
Oh yeah. I was very fortunate. I worked for a lot of bands in the early days. I did the Invisible Touch tour in '86 and '87, which was the biggest tour. I did the INXS tour in '88, which was the biggest tour. I worked at Crowded House. I worked for Barbara Mandrell. And it was great working for all those big tours. MTV was still in infancy, but it was huge.
Yeah. So you were doing lighting then. What have you seen since when you started to now? I'm sure there's a mess of changes, but from when you started to now, like the lighting rigs and consoles and so forth.
Well, I think that's the two. I mean, the one thing is intelligent lighting, as they call it, moving lights. I mean, back in the early days, it was just park cans,
Uh-huh.
simple, 1,000 watt lights that you put a color gel in front of, and they had ACL lights, which were, long. I mean, they still
You'd
have all this.
have to move them with a stick.
Well, I would climb up and focus them. I mean, yeah, in Japan they move them with a stick. In some places they do that, but generally you climb up and you focus them. Moving lights started coming in, I think, around 82 or 83. Genesis they didn't invent them, but they put a lot of money into Very Light because they wanted them on their tour. So that was the advent of intelligent lighting. And then, now there's tons and tons of lights. It's kind of everything's the same now. There's just moving lights. They're bigger, they're brighter, they're faster, whatever, but they're all the same. But they're great. I got no complaints about them. But like you said, with the consoles, the difference that's especially with the moving lights is you have all these different, with a moving light, you have all these different parameters. You have a pan and a tilt. You have color, gobos, focus, brightness. So all of a sudden you had, instead of like a power can, you just turn on or off. You had all these different functions you could do on the light. So, and then you have 100 lights or 500 lights. And all of a sudden you have it's like you have all these functions, and how do you control it? So the way you control it is with the console, the control desk. So with the newer consoles give you the ability to control a 600 light show or 1,000 light show. I mean, some of these shows, like especially television, not Broadway, but like big corporate shows, they have several thousand lights, and you can control them from one console because you have the ability to program looks and stuff. So that's the biggest thing that's changed. Is it gives. Because I mean, my early days, I ran the conventional, and another guy ran the moving lights, and then they got a console got a little bit better, so I could run both on the same console. Now I can run an enormous show, a stadium show by myself.
Oh wow, yeah. A buddy of mine that toured in the early days of Very Lights. He said they used to call them barely lights because they barely worked most of the time.
Well, they had a lot of teething problems back then. I mean, you got to imagine, I mean, you couldn't just go to the shelf and buy the parts for the lights. Everything had to be manufactured in house mostly. I mean, sure, you had gears and knobs and certain things that you could buy in, an electronic place, but for the most part, everything had to be made from scratch.
Yeah. Have you ever had a nightmare gig that you couldn't control? And
well, I mean, there's this, we've all had painful and difficult gigs. I think the worst gig I ever had was an AC/DC show, and it was in Ghent, Belgium. And what had happened is the opening act had played, and the forklift was taking the gear off the back of the stage and bringing it outside to the truck, and it somehow caught the power cable that went into all the lighting, and it pulled the ground and the neutral, which just basically blew almost every single light in the rig up. And so I had no control. I mean, I couldn't control the lights because everything had been burned, or shorted out. So what we ended up doing is just turning on the audience lights, and the band finished. But it was quite a nightmare.
right on, show must go on, right?
Oh yeah. AC/DC's we're like a train. We don't stop.
Right on. For anybody that knows you, man, knows how humble you are, but you've worked for some of the biggest bands, the biggest bands around. What was the first band you got a gig with that you had to take a step back and go like, wow, like this is,
Well, I mean, pretty much every band. I mean, I've been, like I said earlier, I'm very fortunate that I've been working. I work with so many classic rock bands, and a lot of these bands, I was born in '61, and so my youth was spent in the late '60s and '70s and the '80s. So bands like Aerosmith, the Rolling Stones, and all these bands were, helped with me. They were in my childhood. So to one day be working for them, even to this day, I'm still working. I'm like working for Aerosmith. It's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
That I work for these bands. I think, even The Cure, because I really like The Cure. That had an album called Boys Don't Cry, and I love that album. Next thing I know is I'm working for them. But I got to say, probably the biggest thing. The Stones was one of my favorite bands when I was young. I saw them in 1978 at the New Orleans Superdome, and I was just blown away. It was such a great show. But so fast forward to 1989, the company I was working with got the lighting contract to supply the lights for the Stones for the Steel Wheels tour, which was a big tour, huge, probably their biggest. I mean, still one of the biggest tours they've ever done. And I was one. They had two systems, so I was one of the crew chiefs. But what happened for me is a guy named Sean Richardson, who was the LD at the time, the lighting director. He left to do Tina Turner. Unbeknownst to me, they were training me to take over. They would let me run songs here and there because the show was like 3 hours, and he would drink beer and I'd get up to use the portaloo. And so I would take over and run a song or two. And they saw my talent. It was great. Patrick Woodruff and Sean both saw my talent. Patrick Woodruff was the overall designer for the Stones.
Mm-hmm.
So we go to Japan, and Sean's with Tina Turner. And I said to Patrick, who's running the show, he said, we can share duties on the first couple of shows. So I ran most of the first night and then all the second night. And then he asked me if I wanted to take over. So that was just, for me, all of a sudden I'm running lights with the Rolling Stones. I was, even to this day, I'm just,
wow,
blown away.
And have you got, people ask me all the time, like, do you get to talk to the artists? And I've been in the same gig for years. I've done other gigs, but and I tell people all the time, why I talk to my guy pretty much every day, whether I want to or not.
Yeah.
But have you become friends with a lot of these artists? Because I noticed you are, you're the go-to guy.
Well, it's as you know, and I think most people in the business know, it's a tenuous relationship because you're working with them, you're working for them. I always say with them, but you're still an employee. Mm-hmm. So that you have to. There's a fine line between friendship and employee. And Steven Tyler is a prime example. I love Steven Tyler, and I am. Oh yeah, we're friends and everything. But I'm particularly on the road. When we're on the road, same thing with AC/DC. I'm still working with them. When I'm home, like Brian Johnson, the singer for AC/DC, lives in Sarasota. I go to his house quite frequently, and we watch stuff. We sports. We have beer. He barbecues. He loves to cook. And there's two people. There's Brian Johnson, the singer for AC/DC, this guy, this iconic person, idol to me almost. And then there's Brian Johnson, my friend. And just like I make that separation, when we're on the road, especially.
Yeah. So let's go back 44 years again. If you did not get asked to help your buddy with Falconetti, what did you want to do at that time?
Well, I think what did I want to do? Well, I wanted to be a rock star.
Yeah.
I wanted to play back in bands. What had happened is I was in high school and I got busted for pot in high school and I got expelled from school actually. So I was kind of
like every good rock star, Cosmo. Like every good rock star. Like every good rock star.
Yeah, exactly. So I was I knew I wanted to be in the music business, whether I was a musician or, I didn't know I wanted to be I had never thought of being a lighting designer, lighting director. Although I got to say, when I saw Kiss in 1976 and I walked into the arena, the first thing I saw was the lighting ring, and that was the most impressive thing. And I saw guys climbing the ladders to run the truss spots, and I was just blown away by that. But it still didn't make me think I want to be a lighting guy. I watched Ace Frehley and I said, that's what I want to be. I want to be Ace Frehley.
Right on, man. Was that your gateway band, Kiss?
Yeah, pretty much. They were the first band I saw, and in '76 I was 15 years old, so that was very impressionable. Especially with, they were the first band to do. Look at their show back then: the pyro, confetti, the stage set, the lights. They were over the top. They put on a show. I liked Lynyrd Skynyrd. I loved Lynyrd Skynyrd. I actually, a story about Lynyrd Skynyrd is my father. I have a half brother and half sister from Oklahoma, from Tulsa. They're actually from a city called Miami. And Steve Gaines and Cassie Gaines, who were in Skynyrd. Cassie was one of the Honkettes, the sit backup singer, and Stevie was the newest guitar player. So my brother and sister grew up with them. So they played in Lakeland Civic Center. I think it was the third day to the show, the tour, and I got to meet them. I got autographs and got to hang out backstage. I mean, and I was. This is '77. I mean, I was 16, and I was just blown away. Unfortunately, 3 days later, the plane crashed and it killed him, and killed Stevie and Cassie as well.
Yeah.
And so that was heartbreaking. But yeah, that's I liked a lot of bands when I was Beatles. I mean, the Beatles I loved that's probably, I remember that band more than anybody because my mom used to play them when I was really young.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of cool things have happened to you. You told me a story when I was out with when I was working for Aerosmith, and you and I were talking, and you told me a story about a building you lived in New York, I believe, and I can't remember which ball player lived upstairs, but they said
Willie Mays. Yeah, Willie. I lived and I lived in Riverdale, which is a city in the Bronx. It's just right north of Manhattan, across the river, and it was a nice building. I mean, the Bronx was not a great place, but that was the nicer part of the Bronx, and we lived in an apartment building, but there was two sides, and there was two penthouses, and one penthouse, Yvonne DiCarlo, from the Munsters, she lived up there because she was doing a big Broadway show in New York at the time. And Willie Mays from he's originally on the San Francisco Giants, and then he moved. Then he became a Met. Well, he lived upstairs. So it's funny because you could go up there and knock on his door. I was told, and I did this, and it worked. Knocked on his door, and he would give you an autographed card, his photo card. And I had that, and a friend of mine brought over the Who's Tommy album, and I traded the card for the album because I thought, I can get another card, I'll just go up there and do it. But I never did it. But the funny end of that story is I found the same card on eBay a few years ago, and I don't know if it's the same card or not, but it was signed in red ink, and I've never seen another card signed in red ink, and that's what mine was. So who knows? So the guy might have sold mine. Who knows?
Yeah. Did you buy it?
Oh yeah. I 100%. It was $100, but it was every penny.
I follow you on social media. You're always posting of because you live in Florida, of course, so you get to watch all the launches when they happen. Is that something that you're fascinated by? Is that a
Well, I've always, going back to what you said, if I wasn't working I mean, when I was very young, I wanted to be first of all, an airline pilot. And then I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I wanted to be in the Air Force. I wanted to fly F-4 Phantoms. So I've always had a fascination with airplanes and flight, especially military. I love the military. I love the military members, the members of the military. But I love aircraft. I love aviation. I think part of it was my grandparents had a place, and they lived at near Sanford Naval Air Station here in Florida. And they closed it in '68, but I mean, it was a very busy Navy base, aviation base. And so I grew up with planes flying over, my home, when I saw my grandparents. And so, I mean, maybe that had something to do with it, but yeah, I just love airplanes. I love launches. I remember Apollo 11, I was 8 years old when Apollo 11 took off. I've always gone to air shows. I just love aviation,
Right
and
on,
as I
man.
said, I would be a fighter pilot if I wasn't doing this.
Right on. Still can be. You can still do it. Man, during the time when we weren't working, back in 2020, I missed a lot of things about this industry. I missed, of course, seeing my friends, seeing my road family. But one of the things I missed the most was that morning when you get off the bus and you walk into an empty venue, and that, like you said, they're setting up lights and there's truss everywhere, and you just kind of take it all in. What keeps you doing this? What do you love the most about what we do?
Oh, the most. Well, there's a lot of things I love about what we do. I mean, personally, I love the travel. I love the camaraderie. I think that probably the thing I love the most about this business, and only people in the business know it, is there's not many people who can do what we do. It's a badge of honor. Because we work really, really long hours. We travel really, really long distances. we just do a lot of hard things. Not I mean, we don't defy death or anything like that every day, but it's a the old saying, the show must go on. I mean, just think what we do. We get on an airplane and we fly overseas, and we load in these shows. I mean, the amount of trucks that we load into an arena, put it up, do the show, and load out. I mean, people just are blown away. And I look at what we do on a daily basis, but I really like that aspect of it. We're a rare breed, so that it makes me feel good that I can do that. And the camaraderie I have with my friends like yourself, and the things you do, and the relationships you cultivate. I love traveling and seeing. I mean, since I was a kid, I've always wanted to travel and see other parts of the world. And I used to have books that would talk about different countries, and I've always loved history. And I love meeting new people and cultures and trying new foods. There's just something very special about that. But I got to say, if the number one thing about what I love about what I do, and I'll give you a moment. I always use this as an example, a moment in my life and my career. Early on, when I was working for the Rolling Stones, we were in Berlin. We were playing the Olympic Stadium, and it was sold out, of course. This is about sometime in 1990, and they were singing "You Can't Always Get What You Want," and I put the audience lights up and light everybody in the audience, and I look around me. And there's all these Germans, and they're swaying, and they're singing, and they're smiling. And I thought, what a great gig I have to do something that makes people so happy. And that's probably the biggest thing I enjoy, is that we bring happiness to people. We bring so much happiness to people. And that's what I'm always trying to instill on my guys on the crew, that, it might be another show to you, but somebody's going to remember this night for the rest of their life.
I agree. I can't agree more. Whether I'm having a bad day or not, like when that show starts, you see the crowd, like you said, one person that may be the only show they see that year, and you want to see them have a great time. I'm still a fan myself, which I know you are.
Yeah.
Like I look at it like, oh, I never carry that attitude that I work for so and so, or I've done this. I think it's a privilege what we do.
Oh yeah.
And I do agree with you. Not many people can do it. Like, I got into this business late, but like you said, we live on buses, airplanes, and hotel rooms, and that's a hard life. We spend more time with our coworkers than we do with our family.
Yeah. My wife comes out on the road with me, and she travels, and she's like, I don't know how you do this.
Don't know how you do this every day in, day out. That I've heard the same thing. But we love it.
Yeah, exactly.
We're nomads.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, man,
it's a challenge. It's a great challenge that we do. That's the beauty about it. We do it.
Yeah, we do it day in and day out. But like you said, once those lights go down and that you hear that downbeat, it's worth everything, man. If there was anything you could change about your career, would you?
No. I mean, no. I always, I have a problem. When you get offered more than one tour, you have to make the decision on which tour. And I spent a long time, but I used to struggle with the decision. And finally, I just said, just make the decision. I have a saying that says, "There's no such thing as a wrong decision." I mean, it may be a bad decision, but it's not the wrong decision. Yeah. But I found out that whenever I've had a dilemma where I've got 2 or 3 tours going out at the same time, it always works itself out. Something will happen, and I end up where I'm supposed to be. So I really go through my life, not just with my career, but everything with that kind of attitude. Not happy-go-lucky. I still give consideration and thought, but I don't sweat and stress and worry over it. I know that it's going to work out, and the right decision will be made.
Yeah, because there is no wrong decision.
Yes, that's right.
I know there probably might not be much you can talk about, but this upcoming Aerosmith tour, can we expect a big production?
Well, yeah. I mean, this is they're calling it Peace Out. They want to. I mean, we've been doing the Vegas run, as you saw, as you were part of. they liked that. Here's the thing: when they went into that, they were concerned because it wasn't going to be their audience, which they call the Blue Army.
Yeah.
But they enjoyed it, and the fans that came. I mean, it's not like when Aerosmith comes to a city, they play, their fans come. In Las Vegas, it's the other way around. A lot of people go there. It's a novelty. Hey, we're in Vegas. Let's go see Aerosmith. But everybody loves Aerosmith, so they even if they weren't their true diehard fans, they were still fans, and they really really loved it. I mean, and I think they had to work a little bit harder because it wasn't their audience, but that was better. That's what Aerosmith is. They want everybody to work harder to make it better. So I think what they've been told me, what Joe said to me is, I want to bring the excitement of the Vegas show on the road, and you can't really, Vegas is so different because of the glitz and glamour and everything, but there was still an excitement in that show. And it was, and so that's what we're trying to recreate. We're going to do a big production. There's ticket prices are expensive, but so is everything on the road now. I mean, people don't get how much more things have gone up for touring. But I think for the most part, I mean, the tickets are selling well. People are thrilled that they're going to be able to see them. We're doing I think we're doing 40 dates around the country, and people want more. So I am. It's going to be a big show. It's going to, and the fact that they're announcing it as the last tour, I think that they want to pull out all the stops in many ways, not only with the production, but with songs, performances, they still have it, they're going to go up there and kick ass, and I can't wait to see it.
Yeah. Just touching on what you said about ticket prices. I think what a lot of fans don't understand is sometimes they think that if a ticket costs $500, the band is pocketing that $500. I read an article recently. There was a band called Avenged Sevenfold, who just played their first show in several years, but just the busing, just busing their tour was a couple of $1 million.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's the thing, the cost. And here's another thing that people forget, especially with Aerosmith. So the guy, this is the '70s band that are in their 70s. It's difficult to do overnighters or several shows per week. It's harder on the guys. I mean, Steven's voice, like Steven's always said, Joe has a guy that changes the strings. He doesn't have a guy that changes his vocal cords. So he need, the older bands need a little more time to recover, and especially if they want to give a great performance. So if you're doing, we're doing basically 2 shows per week, and people don't realize that whether you're doing 5 shows or 2 shows, the expenses are the same. There's still buses, there's still crew, there's still gear you're renting, and it's hotel rooms, so that the overhead is quite expensive. And then you add to that the pandemic. I think trucks used to be $5,000 a week. Now they're $15,000 a week. I mean, so that coupled with with the price, the swing in price from the pandemic, and the fact that we're only doing 2 shows per week, and plus it's a big production. That's why tickets are expensive. I think another thing that really infuriates me is people look at tickets and like they have it's called resale tickets, and people don't look at it. That ticket's $5,000. I'm like, well, the original ticket was $400. It's a resale ticket. Make sure you read that it says resale ticket on it, because it's not the band making that money. It's whoever's selling that ticket. And what's happened is Ticketmaster has allowed people to scalp tickets, so I mean, everybody makes money off of that end of it, but it's a lot different than it used to be. And
gone are the days of the $10 ticket.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, and most of the time you didn't see a band with a production. You saw a band which would show up with the 2 trusses of lights and the instruments on the stage, and back then especially, they made their money from album sales. Well, as everybody knows, nobody sells albums anymore. So the only way to make money is through touring.
Yeah. Well, man, I appreciate you doing this really on such short notice. I just asked you last week. I've been wanting to ask you, and you're just so busy, so I didn't want to bother you. But man, it's a pleasure to call you a friend. I said, I came into the Aerosmith camp not really knowing anyone. You guys took me in. That was my poster on the wall gig. Those guys were, and I've met so many people that so many lifetime friendships there that I still talk to. And, I love running into you on the road because you're always so positive about everything.
Well, I mean, that's the one thing about me. I mean, I'm just naturally positive, but I do obviously give it some thought. I mean, it's important to be positive, and what we do, we bring, like I said, happiness and joy to people. And I remember when I first went on the road and I had some of the older guys would show me, the things in other places. And so I try to do the same thing. I really try to have the new guys that come in. I want to make them a part of the family, and everything runs together when everybody's happy and has a family. And the fact of the matter is, we get to travel and do what we do is incredible. So I want them to take advantage of it and go see
Yeah.
things, and places, and eat food, and I have
Yeah.
so many friends around the world because of that.
Right on, man. Another thing, man, your trademark or one of your trademarks is your shirts.
Yeah.
Is that did you deliberately say, like, I want people to remember me in my
Well, no,
shirt?
I mean, growing up in Florida, Hawaiian shirts. I've always liked Hawaiian. I'm a beach guy. I love the beach. I've always worn Hawaiian shirts. And when I was first on the road, I was a crew guy and I was climbing trusses and stuff. And but I still had I packed a few Hawaiian shirts for days off. But then when I became an LD and I wasn't, climbing trusses and worried about getting it hung up in, motors and stuff, I started wearing them every day, and people started noticing. And I always say, my shirts are like my lights, bright and colorful and cheerful.
Right
You
on,
know,
man.
and
Right
my
on.
shirts are like my personality. Bright and colorful and cheerful.
Well, brother, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate your time. My podcast, it's called "Is Breakfast Included?"
Mm-hmm.
This is the last question. If it was included, what would you be eating?
Well, I think a lot of people know my favorite food is lobster. So lobster Benedict is a rare treat I get to have, but I'm also a Southern boy and I love grits. But if I would ever be eating with you, I'd probably be eating lobster Benedict.
Right on. Right on. Well, Cosmo, again, thank you, man. It's been good talking to you. I appreciate you taking the time out to do this for me.
Bernie, it's my pleasure. Like I said, it's an honor for me to be on your show, and I appreciate you asking.
All right, man. Well, hopefully we'll cross paths soon.
Yeah, well, I'm out with the Hollywood Vampires and Aerosmith, and I know you're out with Duran, so we'll see. We'll
I'm
see if we
sure.
cross. I'm sure we will.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you see us in your area, give me a call.
100%, and vice versa.
All right, brother. Thanks.
Thank you.
What did I tell you? Positivity, good attitude, just a great human being all around. Like I said, I'd heard the name Cosmo Wilson pretty much all my career. To finally get to work with him and be on a crew with him, everything you hear about the guy is 100% true. All right, guys, I do appreciate you checking this out this week. Remember, isbreakfast.bigcartel.com. Go visit us, buy some shirts. This episode was brought to you by Old Bones Therapy. Go to oldbonestherapy.com, order some compression sleeves, some ankle braces, and use the discount code breakfast to get 15% off. All right, guys, I'm done. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next week.